Today on RoxomTV News, Grant Cardone joins us live, so we're either about to 10x our portfolios or our blood pressure. The U.S. House says you may need a passport to vote because nothing says accessible democracy like digging through a filing cabinet from 1997. And in Bangladesh, a political earthquake just reset the government, but the real question is whether it's reform or simply a new logo on the same power structure. All that and more coming up right now on today's show. Let's get into it. Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome back to another edition here at RoxomTV News. I'm your host, Hank Hudson, and we've got a lot to talk about today and a lot of special guests, so let's jump right into it with this morning's first story that's happening in Dhaka, Bangladesh, where voters have delivered a political earthquake. The Bangladesh Nationalist Party, or BNP, has won a sweeping parliamentary victory, returning power for the first time in nearly 2 decades. Its longtime leader, Tariq Rahman, is now poised to lead the country after years abroad. Turnout was around 60%, which is much higher than the previous national election under Sheikh Hasina, and many inside Bangladesh are calling this the first genuinely competitive vote in years. This explains the celebration in the streets, and it also explains the nerves. Alongside the election, voters approved constitutional reforms meant to limit executive overreach and strengthen independent institutions. On paper, that's a cultural or a structural reset. In practice, however, it depends entirely on whether those reforms are enforced or quietly ignored once power settles in. Younger voters who energized the 2024 student uprising hoped this would be their political breakthrough. Instead, the established party machine dominated the outcome. The protest-linked National Citizen Party secured only a small number of seats, a reminder that organizing a protest is very different from organizing a national campaign. There's also controversy surrounding the absence of the Awami League, historically the dominant party, whose registration was suspended. Supporters say that was necessary to dismantle a coercive system. Critics argue that barring a major party creates its own democratic risks. Now, why should anyone outside Bangladesh care about any of this? Well, because Bangladesh is the world's second largest garment exporter after China. Political stability there affects global supply chains, clothing prices, and sourcing decisions all across Asia. The BNP has won the vote. Now it has to prove it can build institutions strong enough to survive the next political storm. All right, joining me this morning to talk about this story and others, we have a good friend of the program, an independent journalist, Frank Corva. Frank, happy Friday. Welcome to the show. How are you? Great to see you.
Doing well. Always good to be here with you, Hank. Thanks for having me on again.
Oh, the pleasure is all ours, Frank. And I want to talk about what we see going on in Bangladesh right now, because Frank, when you see a country go from years of political tension to what's now being called a competitive election, what's the first thing you look at to decide whether this is a real change or simply a new group taking control? What are your thoughts on what's going on there?
It's a great question. I've been thinking about this for a few weeks now. I was oddly enough at a bar with a friend of mine, and the bartender had just emigrated from Bangladesh about a year and a half to 2 years ago, I think, in the wake of the student uprising there. And I was like, oh, I'm actually curious to hear what happened there. He's like, yeah, things are great. The students took over. Countries run better now. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, how isn't this more widely reported on? Students actually took over a country and they're just running it and it's all good. There's been no challenge from the establishment. And then, as your producer sent me the show notes this morning for some of the things we'd be discussing, some of the news stories, I'm thinking to myself, yes, so things didn't turn out the way that I thought they would turn out long term in Bangladesh. The establishment is sort of rearing its ugly head, if you will, and taking the power away from the students. Now, I say that I'm not sure I agreed with everything the students wanted politically. I think that's besides the point. I think generally speaking around the world, we're seeing populism express itself in different ways. In Bangladesh, it
Yeah.
was a student uprising. Here, this is a center-right party. I'm assuming the students were probably more to the political left, though I haven't researched this particular issue very deeply. But it feels like a little bit of a jab, like you kind of think things are going to change in more of a radical fashion, but it ends up
Hmm.
being a little bit more of the same. Again, this is where I sort of go back to like I think a lot of us in the Bitcoin space where we're just a little bit sort of fed up with politics in general. You have these glimmers of hope, and then things kind of retreat back or revert back to the mean or what the norm is.
Hmm.
And it seems like that's a little bit of what's happening in Bangladesh right now.
Yeah, I feel like that's a story we've heard elsewhere before, and I'm a little disappointed they took the power out of the students' hands. See, I'm from the Midwest, and I don't know if you're familiar with, there's a franchise, a fast food franchise there called Culver's, and all they do is
Okay.
hire teenagers, and it hums along beautifully. It's like, I think it's because they're not corrupted yet, and they just do what they're told. So it's
Yeah.
like, maybe that's something we should be taking into account with, this Bangladesh thing here, but maybe not. Who knows? But nonetheless, Frank, a lot of this election hinged on promises of reforms that are supposed to limit government overreach.
hmm
In your experience, what actually keeps politicians accountable once they win, especially in countries that have struggled with centralized power before? How do we keep them honest?
Oh, my friend, if I had that answer, I'd probably be selling my skills as a political consultant or something along those lines. Well, maybe not that, but I don't have that answer, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I think again, not to be too one-dimensional about like Bitcoin fixes this or think, in along certain lines with most things, but I think what we see, at least in the United States, is that so long as the government is tied to the money printer, that level of power is basically just it's beyond what it should be. And I think that's
Hmm.
similar to the case in many other countries. The bigger issue, I think, also is that around the world right now, there's wealth disparities. Liquidity is drying up. People are struggling to pay their bills around the world, both here in the United States and Bangladesh and elsewhere. I also covered some of the protests that happened in Nepal, the revolution that happened there last year a little bit, and was sort of hearing the same story I hear from everywhere around the world is that people are really struggling. Unfortunately, in these situations, oftentimes for understandable reasons, people tend to look to politicians to say, oh, who's going to fix this for me, right? The
Hmm.
problem feels much bigger than them. And in many cases, it is. Sure, on some level, we all have autonomy, agency, power, and we could do whatever is within our power. But some of these problems feel insurmountable, and it leads to a situation where politicians can abuse or overstep the limits of their power because there's a desperation, and that's something that people want addressed. So, unfortunately, I wish I had the answer to this. When does it stop? What stops it? I don't
Yeah.
necessarily know, but I do look forward to a world one day where ideally it does stop. I just don't think that's tomorrow per se.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. We've seen this story in different places time and again, and we've also seen these huge protest movements that seemingly don't really translate into electoral wins. So, Frank, why do you think it's so hard to turn street momentum into real long-term political power?
It's a really good question. Oftentimes, so the street momentum comes from outrage. Sure, there are some maybe seasoned activists out there who understand what sort of effort goes into organizing and then maybe what comes into play once you've assumed power. But I don't think
Hmm.
that's the majority of the people involved. Oftentimes, you have what is kind of a little bit more sort of like a mob out there, rightfully angry
Hmm.
and protesting what's going on, but you don't always have the plan that's going to be put into place once power is assumed. That's also, you have to assume that some of the people who are out there protesting are maybe thinking, well, I just want to sort of raise my voice, not necessarily thinking we're actually going to take this thing over and have to steer the ship. So
Right.
I think that that's a piece of it. For better or worse, many of the people in the political space in countries throughout the world are quite seasoned in the political processes, know how to make them work,
Hmm.
know how to grease the wheels, know how to do all the stuff that often has to go on, again, whether we like some of these processes or not. So I
Yeah.
think a little bit of this is sort of maybe a lack of readiness, or maybe let me not put it that way. It sounds a little too dismissive of the sort of ambitions of the people who are trying to enact change. But I think there's a certain level of like maybe it's a bit more than they expected to take on. The level of
Yeah.
organizing that they have to do is maybe a little bit not only above their pay grade, but maybe the people that they thought they were going to organize with don't want to play ball. There are power struggles that develop internally amongst the people who have sort of led the revolution. So I think all these factors play into it. And I think governing, just generally speaking, is difficult. I just think it's a
Yeah.
very, very difficult task. And especially when you're sort of new to assuming power and organizing people, I think it's an even more difficult task.
Yeah, you make a good point. Like it's easy to run out there in the streets and be outraged and yell and hold signs, but it's kind of like it makes me think like, what if January 6th went a different way and they like took over the White House and then you have all these people in their face paint and they're like, well, now what? What are we supposed to do? Like we have the
Yep.
White House, now we have to govern. Like people don't think what that next step really is. And like you said, governing is incredibly complicated and difficult, and people don't always realize that when they're out there protesting. And that's just part of the battle, the very first part of it, really. So,
Yep.
and there's also in this particular story, there was something called the Awami League, which I guess was the previous ruling party in Bangladesh. But they were suspended from this vote. And now there's a debate over whether barring a major political party like the Awami League protects democracy or actually weakens it. So my question for you, Frank, is in general, like, how do you think about that trade-off between stability and open, like, political competition in places like Bangladesh?
It's a great question, and I think it's a difficult one to answer.
Yeah.
I don't know offhand the extent of the corruption involved in their ruling. So it's like
Hmm.
saying, when you think about it, if you were living in a place where you had an authoritarian leader or a deeply corrupt leader, it's like, well, are we being democratic if we say this person who has just proven, or this party who has just proven to be, corrupt beyond any sort of redemption, should they be a part of this or not? And what also comes to mind as I say this, I was thinking about it, and this is not a case of corruption, but I was thinking about here in New York, the Democrats actually wouldn't allow RFK to be on the ballot in the previous election because they didn't want votes being siphoned away from Democrats, potential Democrat votes being siphoned from them. Now, I
Hmm.
think that in a situation like that, it's very clear that is anti-democratic. That should not be the case. We should have any sort of legitimate person who has gone through whatever criteria they need to do to be on the ballot, they should be on
Hmm.
the ballot. That's a pro-democracy thing. But I think the other side to this is that if people were just doing, anti-human things, terrible political things, causing drastic strife and suffering, would we want them to run again? It's like saying,
Yeah.
if the Nazi Party got rid of Hitler and then just said, no, we're just going to give it another shot. Would you want them on the ballot? Or it's like, no, I probably would go
Yeah.
with a hard no there.
Yeah.
Whether I'm not a good member of a democratic system or not, I don't know.
Mhm.
It's up for debate, but I think there's nuance with this stuff.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I don't think anyone's voting for the Nazi parties, even with Hitler out of the helm. He makes some good points there, Frank. All right, we're going to move on to our next story. So hang tight, Frank. I'll be back with you in a second because Russia has officially banned WhatsApp. Yikes! Cutting off one of the country's most widely used messaging platforms and tightening the Kremlin's grip on how Russians communicate. The state communications regulator says the Meta-owned service failed to comply with Russian data and security laws, which in practical terms means if you're in Russia and you want to use WhatsApp, you now need a VPN and a bit of patience. For context, Facebook and Instagram were banned in 2022 after Meta was labeled an extremist organization, and Western news sites have forced restrictions ever since. Telegram, once seen as a semi-open digital town square, has also faced mounting fines and regulatory pressures. Since 2019, Moscow has been building what it calls a sovereign internet, a system designed to route traffic through domestic infrastructure that can be isolated from the global web if needed. Digital rights groups argue that if architecture gives the government both technical and legal control to filter content and limit dissent during political tension. Supporters frame this as digital sovereignty and protection from foreign interference. Critics call it a systematic narrowing of free expression. WhatsApp was not only a chat app in Russia, it was a lifeline for small businesses, families communicating across borders, and local community organizing. Now, the government is encouraging users to migrate to domestic alternatives like Max, a state-backed messaging platform. The broader picture here is geopolitical. Since Western sanctions intensified after the invasion of Ukraine, Russia has moved aggressively to reduce reliance on Western finance, supply chains, and now technology. Digital infrastructure has become part of that very strategy. And why this should matter to people at home? Because this is what a modern information border looks like. Not tanks, not walls, servers. And if more governments follow this model, the global internet starts to look less like one network and more like a collection of gated communities. We're bringing Frank back. Frank, when a government blocks a platform like WhatsApp and pushes people toward state-backed alternatives, is that mainly about national security or about control over information flow? What's your read?
I'm going to go 99.9% control over information flow. That being said, I think Russia, and I don't agree with what they did, so don't get me wrong, but I think they have every right to be upset. You know, we saw what happened not only with sanctions, but with the US Treasury freezing Russia's accounts. So yeah, on a certain level, if I were leading a country that has been, where the U.S. has been quite antagonistic towards them on many of fronts. Yeah, I could see not wanting the technology to proliferate in your country. At the same time, I'm in touch with many Russians via WhatsApp. Not that I'm doing any sort of secret Russian stuff, but it's I was a language teacher for many years, and I have Russian students, and I keep in touch with them via this communication technology. When I think about this story, though, I think I'm very, very grateful to things like Nostr, which anybody can access through a web browser. So a decentralized communications protocol or digital identity protocol through which there's some social media clients and you can DM people through these clients. So I think it's only a matter of time that, okay, sure, we see WhatsApp can no longer be used by Russians. That's fine. But there's going to be an alternative out there that the United States isn't even in charge of. So the United States is not in charge of Nostr, right? So that's not a US company, that's a protocol, and the clients can be built by anyone in the world. So I think that right now this is sort of a temporary moment in history where the powers that be are, as you put it, trying to sort of create these walls on the internet. And I get it. Maybe there's like just a little bit of, Russia is an authoritarian country, so they're trying to do what they can to sort of get their people to abide by the rules that they want them to abide by. But freedom tech more broadly, open source technology, Nostr clients, and being able to not even have to download those clients or apps from a web store, being able to access them through a web browser. This is how oftentimes Chinese people bypass the firewall that exists in China. They go to Nostr for DMs and to share information there as well. So I think that some of this stuff is fine. I think for the normies out there who use WhatsApp as their way, who believe that it's encrypted messaging. I don't, who use it as their form of encrypted messaging or the way to communicate with the globe. I think that's it's definitely a blow to that for sure. But I think that we're developing the technology that works around this, regardless of what any government thinks or says about such technology.
Yeah, and if you can't use WhatsApp, you can always use the Pete Hegseth approved Signal chat as well. They're using it for government secrets, so it's secure. All right, we're that. Yeah, that's right. If it's good enough for Hegseth, it's good enough for me. All right, Frank, we're taking a quick break, but when we're back, we're going to be joined by Fernando, the Bitcoin libertarian, and make this into a fun three-way conversation because we got more stories coming your way right after this quick break. So stay tuned. More Roxom TV news coming right back. Welcome back to Roxom TV News. It's time for our Bitcoin story of the hour. And this one's taking place in Copenhagen, Denmark, where the country's largest bank has made a quiet move that says a lot about where this market is heading. Danske Bank announced it will now allow clients to access Bitcoin and crypto exchange traded products, or ETPs, through its investment platform. That means traditional banking customers can gain exposure to Bitcoin and Ethereum using regulated financial instruments without opening a crypto native account or touching a private key. Now, let's be clear about what this actually is, okay? These are exchange traded instruments issued by third parties. Clients are buying exposure to the price of Bitcoin, not taking custody of on-chain Bitcoin itself. This mirrors what we've seen across Europe and the United States, where banks and asset managers have integrated crypto ETPs and ETFs into brokerage platforms as regulatory clarity improves. Even as Bitcoin trades sideways and volatility cools, institutions continue building infrastructure, and access points are multiplying. Traditional finance is not backing away. In fact, it's integrating. Now, here's the important distinction. ETPs and ETFs are structured products. They are wrappers tied to Bitcoin's price. They may be convenient, they may fit neatly into retirement accounts and institutional mandates, but they are not the same as holding Bitcoin on the blockchain with your own keys. Exposure and ownership are two very different things. And this development matters because it signals normalization. When the largest bank in Denmark plugs Bitcoin-linked products into its platform, it reduces friction for mainstream investors and further embeds crypto into the traditional financial system. And for those of you at home, this is about access and education. If you're buying through a bank, understand what you're actually holding. Price exposure can be useful, but sovereign ownership is a different category entirely. All right, joining Frank and I to chat about this story and others this hour, we have another one of our good friends of the program, Fernando, the Bitcoin Libertarian. Fernando, welcome. Happy Friday. How are you? Thanks for joining us.
I'm great. Thank you for having me again. And let's talk about this news about Bitcoin.
Let's do it. And the first question I'm serving up is for you, Fernando. When we see a major European bank like Danske Bank start offering Bitcoin exposure, is this a sign that Bitcoin has won, or is Wall Street slowly absorbing it into every system Bitcoin was designed to challenge? What's your thoughts on this?
I think that the Bitcoin is winning. It's showing that it's winning, and of course, this has brought me a lot of problems with some maxis, because they say that I'm not a maxi because I don't criticize the institutional adoption. But what I think, and you were saying perfectly, is this is exposure to Bitcoin, not having the real Bitcoin, but it gives a lot of access to Bitcoin for people who, in another terms, would never have gone into Bitcoin because they think that having their own key is very difficult. They think that Bitcoin is difficult for them. But if they can buy something that get exposure, and for them is Bitcoin with a bank, it's gonna be good because it's more people adopting, and at the end of the day, many of these people, let's say 10% probably, they go to the rabbit hole and they custody Bitcoin with their own keys. So for me, I'm not against the institutional adoption of Bitcoin. Of course, I would never buy an ETF. But for other people, it's the only way that they will be exposed to Bitcoin.
Yeah, Frank, what do you make of this? Is it good news that Bitcoin is being adopted by big banks like Danske, or is it bad news because it's being absorbed into the very system Bitcoin was designed to challenge? Where do you land on this one?
Not a huge fan of the ETPs and the ETFs. Personally, though, I think my perspective kind of lies probably more in line with Fernando's. If this is how you want exposure to Bitcoin's price, I'm not going to stop you. I think so. There's one thing I think Fernando said it. I mostly agree with what Fernando said there, and I think it's like, well, anybody can do whatever they want with Bitcoin. That includes Wall Street and offering Bitcoin products. I interviewed Hester Pierce, who is one of the commissioners of the SEC here in the United States, and I had an opportunity, I had an opportunity to ask her one question. And what I asked her was, would you consider in-kind redemptions for Bitcoin purchased through traditional markets, through brokerages, these sort of ETP wrappers? And she stopped and said, like, well, why do you need them? If somebody makes choice to purchase the securitized version of Bitcoin, then that's what they want. And I said, well, they might not realize that they're purchasing the securitized version. They might not fully understand what Bitcoin is and then realize that they want delivery of that actual Bitcoin once they have a further understanding of what it is. And she stopped for a second and said, I will consider it. I will think about it. So I think that these are fine, but I would love to see an off-ramp mechanism. I would love to see people decide, you know what, actually, this was really great. This was a good way to sort of onboard me to starting to sort of my Bitcoin journey. But if they can then become something where people can redeem them for actual Bitcoin, I think they would be a really cool product.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you sharing that story with Hester Pierce. That's super interesting, Frank. Because yeah, we know there's a big difference between buying a Bitcoin ETP and actually holding your own keys. But like you said, it is an on-ramp. We just need to figure out what a good off-ramp is for a situation like that. Because as people get familiar, they're gonna, as we know, like all of us did during our own time, wisen up and say, I think I just prefer to hold it natively myself. So Fernando, my question next for you is, for everyday users out there, does that distinction between natively holding Bitcoin and holding it through an ETF or an ETP really matter? Or is the very fact that you're getting more people to get exposure to Bitcoin good enough? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
For everyday user, for like, let's say the normal public that they just see Bitcoin as another kind of asset or investment, I think don't really matters if they go through the auto cost custody or an ETP or ETF. In fact, it's gonna be easier for them to buy one of these instruments. For example, when some of my friends ask me about Bitcoin and they tell me, okay, I want to start buying Bitcoin, I never talk to them about buy Bitcoin on a P2P exchange. So just go to a centralized exchange, transfer money from your bank, do the KYC, buy some Bitcoin, accumulate, and after that, move to your own keys. So on my side, again, I'm not against. I would never buy an ETP or ETF by myself, but it helps a lot of people. And another thing is to make Bitcoin more mainstream because now, for the big part of the population, Bitcoin is still a currency for illegal stuff, for tax evaders. So if now a bank start talking about Bitcoin, most of the people is gonna say, "Oh, now Bitcoin is a good investment." So probably before investing, they start doing the research and they go into a podcast of a Bitcoin maximalist. And instead of going for the ETP, they go straight to buy Bitcoin and hold their own keys. So again, any kind of mainstream advertisement for me is good for Bitcoin.
Yeah, and it kind of, it furthers on a narrative that I think has really become prevalent over the last year, right? Like, if more banks keep integrating Bitcoin products, it kind of begs the question, does that ultimately strengthen the network by increasing adoption and kind of making it more, what's the word I'm looking for, like valid in the eyes of the public? Or does it actually create some new systemic risks by concentrating exposure inside traditional finance? Frank, where do you land on that? Do you think that, institutional adoption for Bitcoin was always something that was going to need to happen in order for it to kind of find its place in the monetary system? Or is the fact that we're seeing it kind of co-opted by institutions and banks a bad thing? What are your thoughts?
It's a really important question. I have mixed feelings about it. I think on a long enough time horizon, it obsoletes some of these institutions. You won't need them as Bitcoin proliferates and becomes more ubiquitous. We're not at that place yet. There's two things that concern me about banks coming. But first, I'll say that I think this idea of legitimizing Bitcoin, as Fernando spoke to, that is actually a good thing. I think when people see it offered in a traditional product wrapper, they think to themselves, "Oh, my crazy nephew Frank, must have been on to something, right? He wasn't totally making this up." But there's two things that are issue. If you believe in this idea of economic nodes that have a little bit more, let's just say, power over the network, they don't technically, it's not like a proof of stake thing where they have more say over validating transactions. But what you might get, let's just take like BlackRock, for example, if they agree that, the node that they validate their Bitcoin that they hold through, which is held by, run by Coinbase, if they say that this is the Bitcoin we agree is the real Bitcoin in the case of a chain split, then there's an issue because maybe the people want a different Bitcoin, the ones that are using Bitcoin as everyday money versus Wall Street, which wants a different Bitcoin, which is just the store of value Bitcoin. So it could lead to a situation like that. That would not be very pretty. That would take some time to sort out. So I think this is difficult. The other thing that bothers me a little bit about the bank stuff is that I think in many people's eyes, it makes them look at Bitcoin as purely an investment versus a paradigm shift. And I think that can be dangerous as well. But I have an open mind. To each their own. I look at the ETF and ETP exposure as a little bit more of maybe like the boomer entry point, whereas the younger generation, I think, will get in through actual exposure, holding their private keys to Bitcoin, using it as money natively on the internet and like such. So maybe this is just sort of the state that Bitcoin is in for the time being in these products.
Yeah, I kind of feel like Bitcoin, at least now, is kind of in like a continual, I guess would the phrase be like battle of attrition, like proving like the longer it stays around, the longer the younger generation is always going to know it's going to be a thing to them, right? And that's, I think, ultimately where the biggest adoption curve we will see is right around that time when we have this younger generation that's Bitcoin's been around their whole life. I guess what are this? The Zillennials? What do they call the new kids these days? I don't even know, but having grown up with it their whole life, it's going to be a whole different space for them in the next 10, 20 years when they start getting their parents' money and they're looking to put it. Gold's passe. You and I, we all know that. All right, we're going to take a quick break here, guys. But when we return, we're going over more headlines from the United States, including the push from lawmakers to change voter verification here in the United States. And we'll talk about it. So stay tuned. More Roxom TV news coming back after this. Welcome back to Roxom TV News. Our next story is taking us to Washington, D.C., where the House of Representatives has moved election law to the front of the political stage. The Republican-controlled chamber narrowly passed the Save America Act in a 218 to 213 vote. The bill would require Americans to present documentary proof of citizenship, such as a passport or birth certificate, when registering to vote in federal elections. It would also require state-issued photo identification to cast a ballot in those contests. Only one Democrat voted in favor alongside the Republicans. Supporters say the bill protects election integrity and prevents non-citizen voting. They argue that a uniform federal standard would close potential loopholes. Critics, however, point out that documented cases of non-citizen voting are extremely rare. An Iowa review identified 35 non-citizens voting out of roughly 1.6 million ballots. A Brennan Center study found 30 suspected incidents out of 23.5 million votes examined in the 2016 jurisdictions. Opponents warn the documentation requirement could create barriers for eligible voters. About half of Americans do not have a passport, and replacing birth or naturalization certificates can involve fees, paperwork, and extra documentation for name changes. The bill now heads to the Senate, where it would need 60 votes to overcome a filibuster. Democratic leaders have said they will block it. Even some Republicans have raised concerns about expanding federal authority over elections that are traditionally run by the states. We're bringing Frank and Fernando back in. Fernando, setting aside party politics here, what do you think is the right balance between protecting election integrity and making sure eligible citizens aren't unintentionally blocked from voting? What's the middle ground here? What do you think they should be doing? Love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, for me, when I discovered that, I think that a couple of elections ago, I discovered that in United States, you don't need an ID to vote. For me, super strange because in Argentina, we need a valid ID to go and vote. Even now that I'm living abroad, I cannot vote here in Hong Kong because in my ID, my address is from when I was living in Thailand. So so for me, it's strange. I think that you need an ID to vote. You must need, because anyways, you can go wherever person go and vote. But again, for me, it's strange. I think that you must need an ID to vote. If you need to show your ID when you go, for example, to buy, not me because I'm already old, but to buy alcohol and show that you are with your age to buy alcohol, I think that you need to show for voting that is super important.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I think you probably need to show some kind of ID. It seems to be the issue here is the types of ID they want might be inaccessible for a lot of Americans to get on short notice. It'll cost them money. Frank, where do you land on this? Is this type of voter identification necessary, or is it maybe becoming a little too much? What are your thoughts?
I think the details and the nuance is important here. I don't think people should be required to have a passport. If you have any sort of just a basic form of ID, then I think that that's fine. Now, I've heard the arguments on the other side of this, though I am a proponent of people showing ID. I just actually voted here in New York City, and they were just like, what's your name? Where do you live? And no check, and didn't check my address, didn't check my license, nothing. And it just felt a little bit like, well, you could have checked something. So I think requiring people to have a passport, you don't need a passport. You know, if people don't want to travel outside the country, or now you actually need a passport to travel between states. But if people don't want to get on an airplane, travel between states or internationally, then okay, you don't need that. But I think it's relatively easy for everyone to get some basic form of ID, even if it's not a driver's license. Basically, something that says like I have a social security number, I live here. And I think
Hmm.
that part of this is because what you're seeing is some politicians say, well, the election was fraudulent. Look at all these people who weren't required to show ID who voted. At the very least, you can now rule that argument out of the conversation if you have people
Hmm.
showing some form of ID. So while I tend to agree that I don't think many non-citizens actually vote, I could be wrong about that. I just think
Hmm.
that's not necessarily true. It would just put the argument to rest that that's happening if there is some sort of requirement to show a very basic form of ID. Again, not a passport, nothing that you have to really go out of your way to get, but something that could be mailed to you wherever you are simply on the basis that maybe you have a
Hmm.
social security number.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think a basic like identification card or a driver's license should be enough. You got to show them something here. But I am curious, guys, as to why this is becoming such a big issue. We've heard President Trump talk about voter fraud or whatever numerous times. But according to this article, non-US citizens voting is actually incredibly rare. It was like 13 out of millions. Why do you think this is such a big issue right now when it sounds like you're hearing only a couple votes out of millions? That's not really going to tip the balance one way or other. Is this because maybe it's just become such a big issue with Trump and he needs to kind of show follow through on this to prove that it's such a big deal? Fernando, what do you make of this? It doesn't sound like there's a lot of voter fraud per se, but it seems to be the talk of the town. What do you make of all of this?
Yeah, for me, like again, I was thinking, like, even though how many people can go and decide an election in an election where the votes are over 150 million? I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's say if I run for president and I want to bring people to vote for me that is not citizen. I have to bring like 50 million people to vote. It's something like that. I think that Trump is doing things that we were discussing about that a couple of emissions ago. So I don't know why he's doing that, and he's probably because he see that the midterms are not going to be good for him, and
Hmm.
he wants to blame someone, probably. And again, that's the I think that's my take. The point is that
Hmm.
for me it's strange to not show an ID for voting. That's the thing. But as per your question, I think that probably he sees that he won't be doing good on the midterms, and he wants to blame someone or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I can get behind that. What do you think, Frank? What's your line of thought of this? You always got a beat as to what's going on.
Yeah, yeah, I think that Fernando basically nailed it in both regards. Again, like makes
Hmm.
sense to have an ID, but at the same time, I have a strange feeling. I think that Trump is seeing the tide turn a little bit. We're seeing people who were even very vocal supporters of his be say sort of like certain lines that have been crossed, whether it's things regarding ICE or maybe just dissatisfaction with the amount of Bitcoin related legislation that's actually passed, or, we were going to get a strategic Bitcoin reserve and that didn't really happen. There might just be this disappointment. And I think, as Fernando said, what he might be doing is just sort of saying like, well, it's not my fault. It's the fault of the election integrity, something along those lines. So it's sort of
Hmm.
whether this is probably more performative than anything, putting this bill through. It's just to sort
Yeah.
of set up some sort of, I guess, scapegoat is the word, which is a
Hmm.
bummer to see. I don't think it's something that only Trump would do or only Trump does. I think all politicians do things like this to varying degrees, but it feels a little bit more like jitters around the midterm elections for sure.
Yeah, no, I think you guys both nailed that one. And, if we see Americans right now, it kind of seems like Americans in general are losing confidence in how elections in this country are run. We're hearing stuff like this. Trump is always calling, fake news. That election was, whatever. My question for you guys, and Fernando, let's start with you. If Americans are now thinking that we can't trust our own elections, what are some of the broader consequences you think for social stability and economic confidence in this country if we can't even trust our own electoral processes? What do you think that will ultimately mean going forward?
Well, if you don't trust your electoral process, you cannot trust the laws. Like, if let's say if I don't trust how the elections are performing in my country, how can I obey a law? I can say,
Yeah.
okay, so that's the point. For example, I can drive drunk, and a policeman stopped me and said, who did this law? A person that I don't trust, something like that. So I think that if you don't trust the elections, it erodes the living in a society, especially
Yeah.
in a democratic society as we live. So that is a point.
Yeah. So what do you think, Frank? Do you think this erosion of trust we're seeing in American elections is eventually going to lead us to the slippery slope of doomsday here in the United States? What's your beat?
I do my best to be an eternal optimist, though
I
things these
appreciate
days
that.
it feels challenging, and it's not just because of this administration or the prior, whatever it is. I think we've just been generally trending in the wrong direction for a while when it comes to integrity and factualness, let's say.
Hmm.
I think the issue here is not just the questions of election integrity, but when you combine that with the DOJ, the Department of Justice in the United States, someone like Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche saying we're not prosecuting anybody in the Epstein files. To Fernando's point, it just makes you say, like, well, why am I following the law? What am I paying taxes to these people for? If we're
Yeah.
not going to prosecute people who do the wrong thing and we can't trust our elections and this and that, you eventually get to a point where there's such a lack of trust that things unravel. And I don't want to speak what the words of what unraveling looks like into existence. But I think I saw a tweet from Lynn Alden last night, and she just said, you cannot continue on this trajectory eternally. Eventually, things fall apart if you just essentially have no factual basis on which to your society can rely. But to her point, she said, I think we're basically approaching the low. I think that's what she said in the tweet. And,
Hmm.
we have to come back to a point where integrity and factualness matters because we can't just keep moving in this direction. And I think as a final thought, AI will only exacerbate this as well. So we're dealing with a confluence of factors that are making distrust people hear what they with their own ears and what they see with their own eyes. But I just think as human beings, we are going to figure it out. We're going to come up with solutions to these things, and eventually the trend will reverse. But we're in sort of the depths of the not such a good part of that trend right now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you're right. And we'll see how this plays out, but I'm more concerned about what might happen next, which is greenhouse gases melting all the glaciers and us all being up to our necks in water. And that's what we're going to be talking about now with our next story. Because across the United States, the Trump administration is targeting one of the legal pillars of modern climate regulation. You see, officials are moving to reconsider the Environmental Protection Agency's 2009 endangerment finding, which declared that greenhouse gases pose a threat to public health and welfare. That finding allows the EPA to regulate emissions under the Clean Air Act. The authority stems from the 2007 Supreme Court case, Massachusetts v. EPA, where the court ruled that greenhouse gases qualify as air pollutants and required the EPA to determine whether they endanger public health. Now, the EPA said they do, and that decision became the legal backbone for vehicle emission standards affecting cars and trucks for more than a decade. The Biden administration strengthened those standards in 2023 and 2024, projecting that by 2032, as many as two-thirds of new vehicles sold in the U.S. could be electric under the updated framework. Supporters of revisiting the endangerment finding argue that strict emissions rules increase production costs and raise vehicle prices. They say the regulations distort consumer choice and burden manufacturers. Critics argue that rescinding the finding would create regulatory uncertainty and likely trigger years of legal challenges from states and environmental groups. States like California, which operate under Clean Air Act waivers allowing stricter standards, could clash with federal policy if the legal foundation were to shift. Now, why does this matter to those of you at home? Well, because emission standards influence what cars are available, how much they cost, where companies invest, and how quickly infrastructure develops. This debate is not only about environmental goals, it shapes consumer prices, industrial policy, and the direction of the U.S. auto market for years to come. Bringing Frank and Fernando back. Frank, at a high level, do you see this as this move as a rollback of regulatory overreach, or does it risk creating uncertainty for businesses that have already invested heavily based on existing standards? What do you make of the potential repeal of this act? What are your thoughts?
I think a little bit of both for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not, this area of environmental science and what's happening. I'm not a specialist in it. Generally speaking, I want to protect the environment. Yes, I get that.
Yeah.
I don't have. I'm not in the granular details of what this previous law, what it required for these companies. I don't think it's I don't you know one of the things that comes to mind is I used to live in Venezuela, and we used to ride these things called rapiditos, which were like cars. There weren't very well maintained cars that served as taxis, and I just remember tons of like smoke billowing out of them, just being like, well, that's probably not good for the environment. But it's like, so it's not like I want, to live through what the sky to be gray like it was during like the Industrial Revolution or something like that. But at the same time, I think generally speaking, we are going to move into an age of deregulation regarding certain things. Is this the thing we should be deregulating? I don't necessarily know. Again, I'm not super familiar with all the details. It does seem a bit unfair that maybe some companies put a tremendous amount of resources into trying to comply with these regulations that had been put in place. So would have to dig in a little bit deeper. I think there are some pros and cons to this. I'm guessing probably, I don't want to say what percentage pro, what percentage con. Need to do a little bit more homework on this one.
Yeah, no, it's a complicated one for sure. And Fernando, what are your thoughts on this? Is climate change fake news, or are we going to be regretting these actions maybe a little later? Where do you stand on this one?
Oh, well, I'm not a big believer of the implic. I think that there is a climate change going on, but I think that is something related to the cycles of the Earth. But on the other side, I'm a big I using the internal combustion is from the past. We need to evolve. From the energy point of view, we must move to electric vehicles. We need to produce better and more efficient and less contaminant ways of energy, not because of the climate change, because of the pollution of the earth, that the air, that at the end of the day is what we breathe. And on the other side, if we move through fossil fuels, we are not going to be able to evolve and consume and generate more energy in a more sustainable way and cheaper way. So I see the evolution of the energy on that side. As Frank said, I'm not an expert on the subject, and that's what I have to say. I don't like the combustion vehicles because are part of the past. I'm living in Hong Kong and I spend time in China, and here most of the vehicles are electric and are like super spaceship. You go into an electric car and they look like spaceships. So I think that the evolution is going to that. I think that the regulation, I'm not a big fan of regulations, but I think that we must boost this kind of energy because it's not better for the environment, it's better for humanity and the evolution.
Yeah, I agree. We definitely want to be breathing that free, clean air. And Frank, one more question for you. From like a free market perspective, do you think the government should even be the one steering industrial transitions like electric vehicles like this? Or should that maybe be left entirely to consumer demand and the market forces? What are your thoughts on that?
It's a great question. I don't, what I'd have to look into is sort of not just now, but throughout history, where there are subsidies for automobile makers. How is the market being distorted by what the government is doing and has done in the past? We know regulation is a part of that distortion. I don't know whether we'd seen things like subsidies or whether we had essentially incentivized people to either create more electric cars or more internal combustion engines that that emit this sort of fossil fuel things that pollute the environment. So I think it's something, again, I need to do a bit more homework on. Generally speaking, I think the free market sorts this out. I'm not a hard line free market person. I think in some cases that regulation makes sense. I'm leaning more towards more and more free market in my political views and my economic views. But I think in these sorts of cases, for example, we don't want factories just dumping sludge into rivers and getting away with something like that.
Right.
Ideally, we live in a world where within the free market, people say like, well, don't use that product because this is what that factory does to rivers, and these bad actors sort themselves out, because plenty of bad things happen despite the fact that regulation exists and that incentives are perverted by regulation. So need to do a bit more homework on that one as well. But ideally, we move to a place where some of these corporations and people creating these products are held to a different level of accountability. Regulation does not always hold them to that level of accountability, nor does the current court system. So I think it's something that needs to be explored in greater detail for sure.
Yeah, definitely a complicated issue with a lot of nuances to it. So, but either way, I appreciate you both giving your opinions on it. I know not necessarily all this stuff is in your guys' direct wheelhouse, but y'all hit it out of the park anyway. So I want to thank you for your time this morning, gentlemen. Before I let you go, Frank, you're doing God's work out there. As always, what's the best place people in our audience can find you and what you're reporting on? So, where can I send them?
Yeah, if you guys want to find me on X at Frank Corva, Nostr, you could just put in my name through Primal or Damus, Frank Corva, LinkedIn, same thing, my name. I'm just gonna do a quick shill. I just did publish an interview with Zia Saad, who is an Iranian activist, a digital rights activist, and a Bitcoin educator in Iran. He was actually imprisoned by the Iranian regime. I sat down with him for about an hour and 15 minutes where he told the story of what is currently happening on the ground in Iran and also how everyday Iranians view and use Bitcoin. So sorry for the quick shill there, but I just published that on X if you could, or I published it across all platforms if you want to go and check out my stream of info via X, LinkedIn, and Nostr clients.
Amazing. Well, everybody definitely go check that out. And I'm always here for a good chill, Frank. This is always the place to do it. Fernando,
Appreciate that.
You've got a great podcast too. Where can people go check it out?
First of all, I will endorse what Frank said because I also interviewed in the past to Sia, and it's really interesting listening to him. So my X is the Bitcoin _, or my YouTube channel in Spanish, the Bitcoin ESP. No, Libertarian BTC ESP. This is my YouTube, and the Bitcoin _ is my X.
Amazing. Well, thank you guys so much. Fernando, I'll see you next Friday. And I think, Frank, you and I got a reoccurring thing, I think, coming up on Wednesdays. Is that right?
On Wednesdays. Tune in. Wednesdays at noon Eastern time, ladies and gentlemen.
Can't wait.
No, I already told Victor that next Friday I'll not be able to be here because it's next week is Chinese New Year.
Oh.
Yeah, and we have a lot of celebrations. And on Friday I cannot be here. So I see you on the 27th.
All right. Well, you better come with some pictures of that celebration. I want to see you as the head of one of those Chinese dragon things they got going on. All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for your time today. It's always a blast. Enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you both next week, or I'll see Fernando week after next or something like that. Excellent. See you guys. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. All right, gang, we're taking a break here at Roxom TV News, but when we come back, we got our next special guest of Friday's show, the one and only Mr. 10X himself, Grant Cardone, will be joining me and my co-host, Walker America, to break it all down. So stay tuned. More Roxom TV News coming up right after this.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising. The dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Fuck. Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
Are you interested in effortlessly growing your Bitcoin portfolio? I sure am. And the Bitcoin credit card by Gemini earns you Bitcoin back on every purchase. You can use it like any credit card. Buy lunch, gas, or your weekly groceries, and you'll earn up to 4% back instantly in Bitcoin or one of over 50 other cryptos straight to your account. All that with no annual fee. And right now, you can grab a $200 Bitcoin welcome bonus. It's the easiest way to start building your Bitcoin stack. Just go to Gemini.com to learn more. All right, everybody, welcome back to our second hour here of Roxom TV News. Joining me for this second hour is our co-host extraordinaire at Roxom TV and host of his own show, of course. We're talking about the most patriotic man in Bitcoin, Walker America. Walker, happy Friday. How are you?
Doing fantastic. Happy Friday the 13th to you. Excited for the show today. We've got quite a big guest.
It is Friday the 13th, spooky, and we do have quite the guest, and his time is valuable, so I think you and I should get into it. What do you say?
Let's go for it.
Let's do it. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want you all to buckle up because the 10X king of real estate has gone full Bitcoin mode, and we're excited to have him join us on the show today. Grant Cardone's orange pill journey started with skepticism. In 2021, he questioned BTC while still calling real estate the undefeated champ. By late of 2023, he admitted one of his biggest mistakes of the year was not buying more Bitcoin, despite already stacking roughly $2 million worth. The shift was underway. Then 2025 hit and he went all in. On June 21st, he posted this screenshot or this tweet saying Cardone Capital adds 1,000 BTC to balance sheets, becoming the first ever real estate BTC company integrated with full BTC strategy. Expects to add another 3,000 Bitcoin and add 5,000 units this year. Now, in July, he announced a $330 million acquisition tied to another 1,000 BTC, calling it the largest real estate Bitcoin deal ever. Earlier that spring, he launched a 10-asset fund targeting 1,000 plus Bitcoin, and the strategy here is quite clear: cash flowing real estate feeding long-term Bitcoin accumulation. He's taken the message mainstream too, speaking in Las Vegas, sitting down with Michael Saylor, and openly targeting 3,000 Bitcoin as part of a hybrid empire model. Now, in 2026, even with Bitcoin moving sideways, Cardone hasn't slowed down. He listed his Miami Beach mansion for 700 Bitcoin, saying, neighbor listed for 88 mil. I'm listing my home for 700 Bitcoin. I'll still be better off 4 years from now. And recently, in an interview with Anthony Pompliano, he disclosed that he owns over 2,000 BTC, and multiple posts on X claimed he recently bought $130 million worth of Bitcoin, fueling speculation about a massive new buy. So with that being said, let's give a big welcome back to the show to Mr. 10X himself, Grant Cardone, everybody. Grant, welcome back. It's always a pleasure having you. How are you since we last saw you? Happy Friday.
Yeah, dude, I'm doing good. I'm 35% lower than I was the last time I saw you, but I'm doing great, and I still feel all right about it. The internet is saying that because I've entered, or people like me have entered, the slow to come to the party, the top is in, and Bitcoin will only go to zero. So they say.
Yeah, so they say. They've been saying that for 17 years now. But I want to get right into the thick of it with you, Grant, because I want to get the record straight. Did you recently buy over 2,000 Bitcoin, or is 2,000 plus BTC your total stack overall?
Yeah,
the people want to know.
Well, you know, it's interesting when you say something on stage in a live audience, somebody in the room then shares it with somebody at Yahoo or Newsmax or wherever. And then no one asks what the truth is. The truth, what I said yesterday is we have accumulated over 2,000 Bitcoin. This was yesterday in New York City with Anthony Pompliano. And that's what was said. Okay. It wasn't that I purchased 2,000 yesterday.
Okay.
So,
okay. And you were in
That
New
would
York.
have been a pretty big single day
I mean,
stack.
if I get credit for every post that I make or someone else makes, I would own as much Bitcoin today as Michael Saylor.
Ooh, not bad. So there was a big conference going on in New York, right? It was some of the big wigs there. I think Kathy Wood was there. You said Pompliano. What was going on in that over in New York?
Pomp was just putting together for 3 days a bunch of people that were talking about crypto and the current situation, and a great event. He put a great event together. I think there was about 2,500 investors that showed up for it over the period of 3 days. And I went in and talked to Pomp about us taking our company public in this real estate hybrid. He knew I was doing this last year. You know, back in, I guess, when I talked to you last time, I think it was July or August, and we were looking at taking the company public. There was 190 Treasury companies. Obviously, Bitcoin's has had its retracement. A lot of those Treasury companies are in trouble today. They're not adding Bitcoin. We are, because we have real estate that has positive cash flow that gets a tax write-off to our investors when we buy the asset, and we are accumulating Bitcoin. So we're very excited about this. This retracement in price has actually benefited me by pushing anybody that wants to do what I was doing back in that got excited. Other real estate guys like me are completely off the board now with this 35% pullback. They're like, yeah, nah, that's not my game. And then the Treasury companies obviously have their hands full with whatever their problems are.
Grant, I've got to ask you, so, you're obviously coming from the real estate world. You've gone full into Bitcoin, and really just gone hard. But in terms of your investors, do you still have to do a lot of convincing with them? Do you get some calls saying, hey, what's up with this Bitcoin thing? The usual questions that I think all of us get, but not all of us manage as much money and property and assets as you do. So how are your investors thinking about this recent pullback right now?
Well, my investor, okay, we're not pitching, I am not full in on Bitcoin. I am full in on real estate, institutional quality real estate. The premise of our business strategy is we believe America becomes a renter nation, okay? Single family homes are unaffordable and will remain unaffordable. And not just because of inflation, but because you cannot build 20% of the cost of a home or housing is going to permits and bullshit. So until you get rid of regulation, you're not going to have affordable housing, full stop. Number two is the cost of money, okay? If the cost of a mortgage is 6 or 7%, that means every year you have to make 6 or 7% every year on the inflation price of your house in order for it for you to break even. Then you got property taxes and maintenance and down payments and blah, blah, blah. So our premise is we're buying institutional quality, best in class real estate in like phenomenal locations, which I can't speak enough about the importance of the location. We then buy that asset below replacement costs. Whatever we believe below replacement cost is the discount, the disconnect, if you will, between the value of the real estate and what we paid. This disconnect, rather than just taking a discount, a lower price, we just fill that space up with Bitcoin. And we end up with two better assets. I could either buy the real estate and have a discount, but you don't really get anything from a discount until you sell the asset. Rather than just take an invisible discount, which doesn't really provide value for the investors or the tenants or the property, we just fill it up with Bitcoin. Now I have two vehicles to make money on, not one. And so I just want to be clear with everybody. We're going super hard on real estate in great locations that we can steal, and then we stack it with Bitcoin, believing that gives us an accelerated volatility hedge against a very conservative investment that cash flows.
And Grant, you're really trailblazing with this hybrid real estate Bitcoin model because, as we know, most real estate guys want boring and predictable. We all know Bitcoin is not boring and predictable. So my question to you, Grant, is at what point did you decide, yeah, I think I'm cool mixing gasoline with this fire? How did that initially come about?
Yeah, so it's back to the earlier question about how's my investor responded. We've onboarded about 1,500 investors into this real estate Bitcoin hybrid. 80% of them, a good 80%, maybe a touch more than that, own no Bitcoin. The number of phone calls that we've had in the 35% retracement is the roundest number you can get, which is 0. Okay? None. Not one call. Hey, Grant, what are we doing here? What's our cost basis? The concern is not about the Bitcoin. They knew that they went into a long-term investment and that we were taking a hope note on this illusionary, imaginary, if you want, this not real, this new technology called Bitcoin. So everybody understands that it could go to 0. That is the way we pitched it and presented it. Guys, it could go to 0. The moment you say that to somebody, they're going if it's going to go to 0, bro, it would have already done it. This has been 13 years. This is not tulips. Okay. The tulip pump, I think, lasted 6 or 7 months. If Bitcoin was going to go to 0, guys, we've had 13 or 14 years to do that. If it was a scam, this is my thinking. Okay. This is the rationale of a real estate investor. If the whole thing was a big scam and Nakamoshi was really Epstein, which was really the CIA, or this was some guy that just wanted to get rich, dude, it was already worth $2 trillion. I mean, if you're going to rob, if you're going to steal something, if it's a scam, $1 trillion is enough. And that hasn't happened though. Okay. And my premise, and I was telling what's his name, the gold bug Shift the other day. So, bro, do you really think that the world is going to go back to gold? It's going to move back 2,000, 3,000 years and use gold. Gold was a failure, by the way. Otherwise, we wouldn't have currency. Okay. We're going to move forward in the future with technology. And I believe Bitcoin is that technology. And we just tell our investors, dude, I could be completely wrong. The whole thing could be a scam. It could go to zero. And by the way, if it does go to zero, at which point everybody says, no, it won't go to zero. Everybody, okay, says, no, it's not going there. Even if it did, though, I still end up with my real estate. I still have my tax write-offs. I still have the cash flow, and I still have a real use, a utility, which is housing.
Mm-hmm. The way you talk about it too, Grant, I mean, you can tell this is a high conviction play for you. I mean, just the way that you talk about Bitcoin, even your knowledge of gold and real estate, and kind of pulling this all together, like clearly you're somebody who has to, you're thinking in long terms. You're, low time preference. You're thinking about not just the next year, not just the next 5, but the next 10, the next 20 generations even. How do you look at Bitcoin in terms of store of value over that long term, generational wealth wise? Is this always kind of going to be in tandem with real estate, or at some point do you say, okay, it makes sense for me to actually increase my exposure to Bitcoin relative to my real estate holdings over the kind of extra long term? How do you think about that?
Look, I mean, we already really have, it's a great question, but since the last time I was on your show, we have already increased. We were buying 85% real estate and 15% Bitcoin. We're now at a 50-50, actually a little more Bitcoin than the real estate. So the last transaction we did was in total 330. It was $100 million of Bitcoin, $100 million of equity in the real estate, and $130 million of long-term debt. So we had a Fannie Mae loan for 130, $100 million of Bitcoin, $100 million. We're paying cash for both assets, right? We're paying cash for the Bitcoin asset, and we're paying cash for the equity portion of the real estate. And then we take a Fannie Mae loan at 5%. So your premise about the long term, yeah, dude, I'm not even thinking about 4 or 5 years. I'm thinking about, I get to 10 years, I refinance the 130 out, because I'm going to get a new loan at 5 years. 5 to 10 years, I'm going to get a new loan on the asset. Every 7 to 10 years, I should be able to recapture all the equity that we put down on the asset. If I poorly pick the asset, I should be able to recapture my $100 million for the real estate, which allows me to pay back all our investors. And now we own the real estate and the Bitcoin, and we're still cash flow positive, and we got massive tax write-offs. Now, in 5 years, I mean, you guys just write down, what do you think the price of Bitcoin is in 2030? Write down a little sheet of paper separately from one another, so you can share your little numbers. I'm gonna write mine down. You write yours down. If you guys have something to write on, okay?
Right, yeah.
I'm gonna write down conservative number.
Conservative 2030.
2030.
2030. Okay.
Okay, you ready to show?
Yeah.
I got 480. What do you have?
I had. Well, you can't see mine. I have 300.
Okay.
I got 1.21 million. I'm going a little bit. I figured you guys would go low, so I went high.
I have 1,000 pieces of Bitcoin with that one purchase, just the one deal that we did. Okay. So if I use the 300, we have $300 million score. And I'm like, okay, I'm sick of the Bitcoin. I sell my 300 million. We paid 100 million for it, or we paid $92 million for it. Okay. I sell off that. We pick up $218 million. And we still own the real estate. See, the problem with most people is they get an asset or a business, they build it up, they have a score, they sell it, they're back to zero again. Right. You're zero and your score. The same problem with gold, same problem with silver, the same problem with real estate, same problem with Bitcoin. You guys get your Bitcoin, you bought it for $300, you sell it, you make $1 billion, boom, you got your $1 billion score, but you're back to, what do I do now? And so I don't want to sell an asset and end up with nothing. I'd rather never sell the asset and end up owning it with no money in it. And there's a premise in that situation. I could actually borrow in 5 years against the Bitcoin and the real estate combined. So that real estate in that example, the Bitcoin's worth 300 million. The real estate, we know in 5 years should be worth 330 million. So I have 630 now in this one investment. and I only owe $130 million, and the loan's due. So I'm going to go get a new loan for 300 against both assets, not one asset. That's not available today, but it will be in 3 to 4 or 5 years, where you can borrow against your real estate that cash flows, not a single family home, but real estate that cash flows, that has a real utility, and the Bitcoin combined. It won't be Fannie or Freddie, but it'll be somebody that's going to get in the game and combined commercial mortgages with the most liquid asset in the world, which is Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate you sharing your prognostications of where you see this is going, because you have been remarkably accurate on a couple here, Grant. And I want to talk about one specifically, and I want to give you your flowers for a little bit, because months ago, you warned that there would be a massive implosion in the Bitcoin treasury companies, especially the ones that had no real business underneath. Now, months later, we're seeing some major cracks in those Bitcoin treasury plays. So I got to ask, like, how did you see this coming? Was the math just not mathing? Like, you saw this before a lot of people did. Explain to us.
Well, there's too many of them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, anytime there's too many of anything, somebody dies. So, one, there's too many of them. There's 109. I mean, I don't know. It went from one Mike Saylor to like Mike talked the whole world into getting into it. And the problem that those other guys missed that Mike didn't was the scale. He scaled, you know, and Mike started with cash flow, by the way. These companies are starting with no cash flow, no product, no service, no history, no accounts receivables, no accounts payables. There is nothing. There's no customer. Mike at least started with a company that was making money.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether that company had, you know, a future or not, or could stay in the marketplace and compete is another issue. But look, too many guys rushed in. Too many guys that never run a business rushed in. Like, running a business is not, you can be a hype man, and I am, by the way. I'm one of the best hype men in the world. I'm a sales guy, I'm a promotional guy, I'm a marketing guy, but transitioning from marketing guy to running a real business, okay, for over decades, and transitioning into new industries is not for everyone. And so you got a lot of people that loaded up because money was cheap, okay? And this is the second part of the formula. Like, when money's cheap, you know, people do reckless things. If you take Naka, you know, what is it, Kindly MD or whatever, that company, like, what's the exit, dude? Like, that, there is no exit. There is no exit from the purgatory that the investors that David will live in. There's no product, no service, no future. They're sitting on 4,500 Bitcoin. That's the only value in the company, but they raised $750 million or some absurd number. The only thing that can bail them out is Bitcoin. And even if that happens, they still have no income.
True.
And if you don't have income, dude, you're going to die. Like, income is the oxygen to a company. You have to have income at some point, unless you're a Netflix and you can go 28 years of borrowing money from people, or an Amazon, and you can borrow money forever. But the truth is, these companies will not be able to borrow money forever. So the pendulum that Mike talks about, that Saylor talks about, you know, like, I'm going to borrow money against my Bitcoin, then I'm going to borrow against my shares. Like, that game's over now.
Mm-hmm.
You know. So anyway, how did I see that? I don't know, dude. Like, the whole thing seemed ridiculous to me in the beginning. Now,
yeah,
I said last year we were with the bankers in Wall Street, and they said, "Hey, we love your product. We want to bring you to the market. We want to bring you public as a treasury company." I said, "I will never be called a treasury company." Mm-hmm. I said this back in July, and they said, "Oh yeah, man, the Bitcoin treasury companies are hot right now." I said, "They will not stay hot. This will be like an STD that you don't want and you can never get rid of. We will not be called a Bitcoin treasury company. We're going to be called a private real estate company hybrid of real estate cash flow and Bitcoin." And so we're still looking at going public, but the marketplace is obviously not conducive for that right now. But we will find that opening to take advantage of that.
So just following up on that, and I appreciate the perspective because clearly you have been very right, and we're proven right pretty darn quickly with these. But you also separated Sailor, what Mike is doing, what Strategy has done. They also had that first mover advantage. They had a cash flowing business, right, that they were using. Yeah, now the value of their Bitcoin is substantially larger than their annual revenue, but still they started from that base. Do you think is that really the only way? Basically, the Strategy, maybe a couple others are going to kind of weather the storm. But these others that have sort of jumped on the hype bandwagon are ultimately just going to end up getting, bought for the price of their Bitcoin at the end of the day. Is that kind of how you see this playing out in the end game? Like winner take most or winner take all for these treasury companies?
I don't know that they, that they survive at all. I think they end up selling their Bitcoin, end up in a bunch of court problems with a bunch of litigation. There's so much hair in those companies, so much complication legally that I doubt anybody wants to buy the companies. And at some point, they're just going to get exhausted, right? Now, Mike Saylor's got a different issue. I believe Mike becomes a bank. I believe he becomes a massive transition. He will not be the company you know him as today any more than, how JP Morgan started out, okay? Like, he wasn't a banker. He didn't start out as a banker. No, these people were all salesmen. They were marketers in the beginning. They were hustlers, and they moved at scale. They moved scale. If you go back to the railroad days, they moved with scale. They moved with speed. That's what Mike did. Mike moved with tremendous amounts of speed into the marketplace. He was not just first. Well, he wasn't first. He was actually late. But bro, when he went with so much conviction and so much speed. So he was somewhat first to market, even though he was late, right? He was a newcomer really to the Bitcoin space. I'm a newcomer to the Bitcoin space. Mm-hmm. There's guys out there that have been buying Bitcoin since it was $1, $30, $300. But many of those people, the OGs, they have not added any Bitcoin in 13 years.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how much conviction do they have and how much credibility do they really have if your last purchase was when it was 300?
That's a good point. What do you think will happen to Bitcoin ultimately if we do see all these treasury companies blow up? Is that something like it's necessary pain to make the Bitcoin space healthier in the long run? Or do you think that'll have some kind of damage that?
Yeah. Well, there'll have to be some damage, but the Bitcoin's going to get transferred to somebody else's wallet, right?
True.
And we're open for business. So, any of those treasury companies that's hearing me talk about you right now, including Naka, like we would welcome providing you with an exit. And because we're a real business. There's nobody I don't show this to that's like, bro, this will be a surviving vehicle. Combining real estate, institutional, best in quality real estate that we are stealing. This will not last forever, by the way. You can't steal real estate forever. We're buying 30 and 40% below a marketplace and taking that 30 and 40 and just stacking Bitcoin on top, hybriding the two, fusing the two together as an investment vehicle and having a real case usage and a utility. People have to live someplace. So some of those treasury companies out there that may be attempted to pull this off, you can't raise money. You can't go back to the marketplace and do a pipe. You can't go back to the marketplace and sell shares. Nobody's touching you right now. So any of those guys, we would provide an exit, and we believe with the right branding and the right marketing, have an instant pump, just because there's an exit now. When you find a door, you're in a burning house. In the beginning, you're like, okay, I can maintain this, and then the oxygen starts to get reduced in the place, and then the temperature gets increased, and you're like, fuck, dude, I'm gonna die here. And then you'll take any door, any window, any exit, and it brings life back into this vehicle that's dying.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting.
I want to ask you too, Grant.
Go ahead, please.
Oh, go ahead, Hank.
No, go ahead.
Oh, well, I had to ask you, Grant, this 700 Bitcoin offer that you've, that you've put up for the house, basically your house in Miami.
Yeah.
I saw this and I thought this is really interesting for a number of reasons. The primary reason for me was you weren't talking in dollars. You were talking in Bitcoin. You were saying, this is the price that I will take in Bitcoin which a lot of people, I mean, you obviously, you can think in both, that's what you do every day. But this was fascinating to me because, you're not talking about, hey, okay, I'm going to change this now to 710 or 690. No, you said 700 Bitcoin. You come to me with this, it's yours. Can you talk us through that thought process a little bit? Your neighbor was selling his. You decided to go a different route.
Yeah, so I have a neighbor, 255 Ocean Boulevard. They're on the market for $88.5 million. And this is, 18 houses for me. I have a better beach access, by the way. I have one of the most phenomenal beaches in all of Miami. There's only 60 homes that have sand in front of them in all of Miami, the entirety of Miami, okay? Miami Beach. There's only 60, maybe 62 homes with sand in front of them. I'm one of those beaches. So same with house down the street for me, brand new. They just built a brand new house there. I'm not a brand new house, but it's 88.5 million. So I came out, went and looked at the house. I'm like, this is fantastic. My house is approved to be torn down, permitted for a brand new home. So it will also be an 88 million or $90 million home. So I said, guys, come in and buy my house. You can live in it the way it is, 7 bedrooms, 6-car garage, arguably the best oceanfront, beachfront setup. You can live in it today, but you'll have permits to have a $90 million house there. But I'll sell for 700 Bitcoin. That day, I think Bitcoin was at 70 million or 70,000 that day. So I wanted 49 million that day. It would be more Bitcoin today. I guess it would be 720 Bitcoin. But the reason I'm doing that is because I'm part truth, part troll. That thing about me, you guys got to watch out for. Every post I do, everything I admit that I am part truth and part troll. Truth or troll?
Truth or troll. That's the game we should have played. Shoot.
You should play the game truth or troll, dude. And because everything that I post has a little bit of truth and a little bit of troll. So I know this is going to get a lot more activity than if I would have listed my house for 50 million. Just because I'm trolling in Bitcoin. But look, I would prefer somebody pay me in Bitcoin. By the way, if it's an OG that has 700 Bitcoins that he paid $100 for, he's buying my house for 70 grand.
Not bad.
And that'd be a smart play. He'd buy my house for 70 grand, take the house, and he could build a new home and pick up another 20 million. So he's got a big victory.
Yeah. So Grant, I got one for you. Truth or troll?
Yeah,
we're going
like
to see
that.
more. Yeah, I do. I might have to take that from you. I'm going to borrow it.
Yeah.
Truth or troll? Are we going to see more luxury properties priced in straight Bitcoin, or was that just you having a little fun and drawing up some media attention?
No, I don't think you do. I don't think people. Yeah, I don't think people will advertise their homes for Bitcoin. I think people are having enough trouble selling their homes the way they are.
Yeah. I get that. All right. Well, I think, guys, it might be time for us to switch things up, loosen up, switch gears, and have a little fun with a little game that we like to call, that we played with Grant on the show last time, called Cardone or Cardone. So, guys, let's roll the stinger, and then we're going to go over the rules. Let's get into it. All right, we're back with Grant Cardone playing a little game called Cardone or Cardone. Here is how it works. Walker and I are going to alternate asking Grant questions, and he's going to tell us whether you should do it or you should don't not do it. All right, so let's get started here. We got the man, Mr. 10X himself, answering these questions. So, Grant, putting 50% or more of your net worth into Bitcoin after this reset back to the low 60Ks. Cardone or Cardone?
Cardone.
Cardone. Why should we not do that?
Well, dude, look, I would not go buy big. If I needed cash flow, let's say I'm 28 years old or 58 years old, the age really doesn't matter. But you need cash flow, I wouldn't buy one Bitcoin today. If I had my last 70 grand, the Bitcoin would not be what I would purchase. I would purchase something, I would invest my money, 100% of it, by the way, in one thing that cash flowed. And I would use let's say I earned $5,000 a year from that investment. I would use the $5,000 of cash flow and buy Bitcoin. I would not use earned income to buy Bitcoin. I would use passive income to purchase my Bitcoin. That way I never lose, that way I never lose my original money.
Yeah, keep the principal safe.
Yeah, exactly.
Makes sense.
Now, if you're rich, if you're sitting on a couple $100 million and you want You're like, okay, I got 100 million liquid, and I'm like, I'm gonna put 50 million in Bitcoin. I like that idea.
Okay. All right. I just got to get 100 million first. Walker, what do you got?
I mean,
All right, great.
yeah, maybe it's not 100, but you know what I'm saying.
A little
Hey,
more.
a guy can dream, right? So, okay, I got another one
The guy
for you,
should
Grant.
dream, and he should dream big, by the way.
Amen to that.
Yes, sir.
Amen to
Cardone.
that. Cardone. Next one for you. Ending the Federal Reserve. Cardone or Cardone?
100% put a goddamn bullet in the head of the Federal Reserve.
That's what I like to hear. That's a strong Cardone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, hang Jerome Powell in public.
Oh, wow. All right. Taking it a step
After
further
a fair
already.
trial, of course, by his peers.
Yeah. This is America after all, guys. All right, moving on. Here we go, Grant. I got a fun one for you. You're golfing with President Trump. You're around the green, and you notice he gives his ball a discreet foot wedge onto the green itself. Do you call him out on it? You do or you don't?
You definitely Cardone that. Do not call the president out for getting a better lie. I played with him before, by the way. He's a great guy. Fantastic.
Yeah, I've heard
I was
things.
going to ask you, speaking from experience there with the foot wedge.
No, I'll tell you. I played with him up at Bedminster, and there was 4 of us playing. And he says, "Okay, guys, whose team should I be on?" I said, "Well, they're better golfers." I said, "These 2 guys over here are better, but if you want to win, pick me." He's like, "I'll fucking pick you."
Nice. Wow.
And we won. And we won, by the way.
Oh, nice. He's a pretty good golfer, right?
Yeah, he's a great golfer.
Nice. All right, Walker, you're up, bud.
All right. This one is not talking about size here, just talking about general direction. But buying this Bitcoin dip at 67K, 69K, whatever we're doing right now, is this a Cardone or a Cardone?
Well, we bought it at 67. We bought it at 65. We bought it at 62. I have orders in, close to where we are right now, and I have orders in below that. So I think we could easily have a dip, test the 50s, maybe even lower than that. But I think by the end of the year, we're going to be higher than where we are right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we're all getting on board with that. All right, next one. Here we go, Grant. We're going to go to a little more general life advice here. They say the most important decision you make in your life is choosing your spouse. So my question to you is, Cardone or Cardone marrying someone who doesn't understand investing but supports your dreams? Cardone or Cardone?
Yeah, Cardone, but dude, do not let her touch the money.
I never do. That would be
Cardone, but have separate accounts.
Cardone with separate accounts. I like the Cardone caveat there. I'm here for it. Walker.
Yeah. All right. So this one's a little more random, but everybody seems to be taking peptides these days. Is that a Cardone or a Cardone for you?
100% Cardone. I'm on peptides.
Okay.
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 Our company, 10X Health Systems, we provide a number of supplements for about 250,000 people a month.
Oh, wow.
So I'm 67 years old. I very, very much believe in using alternative supplements and biohacking to stay in the best shape of your life. Cardone.
Cardone.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
I like it. All right. Coming up next. Here we go. Grant, buying your first primary home right now with a 6% mortgage rate because it's the American dream. Cardone or Cardone?
Yeah, just Cardone. Be stupid.
I think we need to change the name of the game. Cardone to Cardone be stupid. All right. I like it. Walker.
All right. So it's Valentine's Day tomorrow, the love holiday, right? Your wife asks you, honey, did you get me flowers? You say, no, babe, but I did buy more Bitcoin instead. Is that a Cardone or a Cardone for the guy?
Dude, my wife, that would be a Cardone. My wife would fucking love that. She'd be like, how many?
There we go. There we go.
The problem is she wants a whole Bitcoin every time we do anything. So it might be cheaper to do a dozen, 3 dozen, 10 dozen.
There you go.
Roses.
Supporting his dreams. What a great woman. She sounds incredible. All right, the next one for you, Grant. Here we go. Waiting for the Fed to cut rates before making a major investment move. Cardone or Cardone?
Yeah, I would. We're going to buy a piece of real estate. I'm going to do a deal today with a big institution, and rates aren't where I want them to be, but I believe that they will be there by June or July of this year. So I would Cardone it. I would buy the real estate today, put it on probably a short-term a 12 to 24 month adjustable rate and wait for rates to come down. Cardone.
All right, Walker.
Steal the real estate, man. Steal the real estate right now. This is a great opportunity for people.
Yeah.
Lifetime.
Okay. So this next one, the U.S. government actively buying Bitcoin, not just holding on to the confiscated Bitcoin, but actively buying Bitcoin for the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. Is that a Cardone or a Cardone?
Well, I wish it would. Yeah, Cardone.
All right. That was easy.
All right.
I'd rather have that than have gold.
Yeah.
Right there with you.
And you've golfed with President Trump. Did he indicate anything one way or the other? Any inside slants he can give us, Grant?
No.
All right.
That'd be a Cardone. That'd be a Cardone. I cannot.
That's good. That's good. Loose lips sink ships. So I like to hear it. All right. So here's my last one. All right. Assuming Bitcoin replaces gold in the next decade, Cardone or Cardone, where do you land on that?
Does it replace it or does it become as big as it?
Well, okay, become as big as it. Let's rephrase.
Yeah, I think I saw this post the other day that it'll take 20 years for Bitcoin to surpass the total value of the gold supply. You know, today would be, I guess, I don't know what the value of all the gold is, the market cap of all gold.
Yeah.
If it took 20 years to do that, this would be one of the most phenomenal things. I heard a guy say this. It'll take at least 20 years. I'm like, bro, the other asset is over 5,000 years old. Okay.
Yeah.
If in 33 years, Bitcoin is the same value as all the gold on the planet. By the way, I don't think there's a shortage of gold. I don't think the metals are precious. There's no world I live in where I'm interested in gold or silver. I don't care what it goes to. I have zero interest. Okay. None. At 67 years, nobody's ever offered me gold or silver to buy something for me, ever. Not one time. I've had people offer me Bitcoin to buy my products and services. I have never had an offer of gold or silver in my entire lifetime. So and by the way, I don't believe that there's a scarcity of gold or silver. I think in the future we will find 10x amounts of gold and silver on this planet. If not on this planet, in the ocean, which is also on this planet. And if not on this planet and in the ocean, we'll find it, as Elon says, on another planet.
Yeah. Yeah. Or one of those meteors. I saw how that movie Armageddon worked. You just send some coal miners
Don't make me
into
cry,
space.
dude. Don't make me cry. Dude. I've watched Armageddon 27 times and I've cried every time. Don't even bring it up.
I don't want to miss anything either, so I can understand. It was a very touching film. I think that concludes this edition of Cardone or Cardone. Grant, we thank you for being a good sport here, and we're going to get back to a couple more general topics here, and one that we haven't had the chance to ask you about yet that I think is really kind of circling people's minds right now is about MicroStrategy. We've talked about them earlier. They're one of the kingpins of the Bitcoin Treasury companies. What are your thoughts about them potentially facing a liquidation price if the Bitcoin price continues to draw down lower? What could you see in store for strategy if that were to happen?
I mean, I just don't see how that happens, right? If it gets down to $10,000, I mean, I won't have any cash if it gets anywhere close to before it even got to 10,000. If it breached 40 grand, I would unload every penny that I have to buy Bitcoin.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then if it went from 40 grand, let's say I breached and went through all my cash, and then went to 19,000, you know, I couldn't have said this 2 or 3 years ago, but I would probably start leveraging stuff I have to buy Bitcoin. So I'm just one guy, by the way.
Yeah.
So if I'm just one guy, how many other people are having that same conversation?
True.
So
True.
it gets to $19,000. Somebody's buying it. Forget Mike buying it because Mike can't buy it all, right? Mike can't be the only buyer.
Yeah.
That's not a good story. That concerns me. So then it goes from 19,000 to 10,000. Somebody's buying that Bitcoin, guys. Like somebody's been watching from the sidelines. How many of these OGs are going to come back in and say, "Fuck it, I'm coming back now"?
True. Could be.
So anyway, I just don't think that happens to Michael. I think Michael becomes a bank, and the other company will just poof disappear. And also, I think that there's a bigger play for Mike. I think Mike's not even thinking about Bitcoin now as much as he's thinking about becoming a treasury company. a real treasury company, like a bond company, like the old bonds. What bonds used to be, he will become.
Okay.
I think you're right about that. It seems to be the way he is positioning too, and he's got the foresight and long-term vision to actually make that happen. And I've got another question for you, Grant.
Yeah,
This is like
I think Walker.
oh,
Let
go
me
ahead.
just say, I just think he kind of. I think Mike. I did an hour and a half interview with Mike, and you know, if you spend enough time with somebody in an interview, at the beginning of the interview, you haven't really breached the kind of social veneer. Somewhere in that about 40 or 50 minutes into it, dude, something cracked. And I've been around Mike 4, 5, or 6 times, but I breached the social veneer, and I could see that Mike had let me into another peek at what he's thinking. And I knew I was seeing this maybe at least for me for the first time, and maybe the viewer too. But I don't think Mike's thinking about Bitcoin as much as he's thinking about $300 trillion of treasuries, $30 trillion in treasuries. And if he could get 10% of that, he's a $3 trillion guy. And I really think that that's where he's thinking about, you know, where people could earn 8 and 9 and 10% or 11% a year against this other commodity that he would hold on his books called Bitcoin. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, not at all. And I appreciate that. I think you're right on that. And it seems to be where his head is at, just judging by everything he said. I wanted to ask you, just zooming out a little bit, like you have obviously, you've gone down the Bitcoin rabbit hole now. You are knowledgeable about this. You just talked about backing up the truck, basically backing up as many trucks as you can get, leveraging those trucks to buy more trucks to back more up if Bitcoin goes down. What do you think it takes to move the needle more broadly for people around Bitcoin? Because if we're being honest, Bitcoin, in terms of people that own Bitcoin, it's still a tiny fraction of the world. And we've got 21 million of these things. We got, 60 million millionaires in the world? I mean, there's not enough for every millionaire to have one Bitcoin. What do you think it takes for people to finally click and move the needle? Is it a big watershed moment, or is it just kind of gradually, and then suddenly?
Yeah, dude, I mean, you're 100% right. Like if just 35% of just the millionaire families in America just bought one coin today at 67,000 or whatever it's at, you'd be over what's available. So now what needs to happen is, and I've said this many times, but the Bitcoin community has to quit talking about some of the stuff they talk about. Like the world's coming to an end, the US dollar is going to crash, the system needs to be rebooted, Bitcoin's going to save everything, there'll be no more pedophilia, wars, water problems, food problems. Like, Bitcoin's not going to solve every problem in the world. When the revolutionary Bitcoiners start talking like this, you know, that there's not going to be a dollar, and it's so out of my context of understanding, and maybe I'm completely wrong, but it's just not real to me. So the reason I think that, or I have to do 100 hours, or I have to read the Bitcoin Standard, or I have to understand the blockchain. Fuck, I don't want to understand the blockchain, dude. Or I have to hold my own keys, and if I don't hold my own keys, it's not my Bitcoin. And IBIT and Blackstone and these guys coming in are destroying Bitcoin. And you know, like, guys, if those institutions don't hold Bitcoin, we're never going to make the transition. So all this negativity is not what's going to propel this mass adoption. It's going to be acceptance that here's an alternative. You know, this is merely an alternative to a dollar that everyone agrees will continue to be printed. And like gold or silver or stocks or real estate, Bitcoin is simply an alternative investment class. Now, when we combine the two, you know, we onboarded 1,500 people into Bitcoin that don't even really know what Bitcoin is. But they're going to have hopefully over the next 4, 5, or 6 years, they're going to have the positive experience of owning Bitcoin while we cash flow the real estate.
Yeah. Grant, you make some really interesting points. It's kind of like people talk about like Bitcoin will thrive when it's the end of days, but it kind of gets like co-opted in this like doomsday narrative. But like Bitcoin's this very important piece of tech, and sometimes it gets treated like something else just because of all these narratives out there. So we appreciate you breaking that down for us.
Yeah, I heard yesterday in a room that Bitcoin and the US dollar cannot exist in the same space. They cannot coexist. I'm like, yeah, that's not what I want to hear, dude. I don't think there's a world where the U.S. dollar doesn't exist. I don't think the U.S. dollar goes away, personally.
Yeah, it seems like we're moving toward that kind of bimetallic system that our own Nolan Bowerly talks about a lot on the show here. Well, you'll have money for spending, and then you'll have like a money for saving, and you're going to be working with both of those going forward. So we'll see how it plays out. But I got to say, Grant, always an absolute pleasure to have you with us on Roxom TV News. It's always a blast talking shop with you. So I want to thank you so much for spending time with Walker and I this morning. It's always great. And before we let you go, I know you have some amazing things in the works right now. If people in our audience want to check out more about what you're doing with your hybrid Bitcoin real estate play or whatever else you got up on the docket next, what's the best place I can send them so they can get more info?
Yeah, go to cardonecapital.com. We're doing a big deal right now, 2 deals actually that we're buying from institutions. And on one of the deals, it's a cash flow deal and just it pays cash flow. And the other deal is going to be a real estate Bitcoin hybrid that also cash flows. Bought by an institution, phenomenal location, well below replacement cost, what they paid for it when they traded last. And we're super excited about it. CardoneCapital.com.
Amazing. Well, we're always excited to have you join us in the program. So thank you again, Grant. Have a great rest of your weekend. And we hope to see you again real soon, my friend.
Thanks, guys. Great show. And remember, you can come grab my oceanfront house for 700 Bitcoin.
All right, Walker, we'll talk later.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Grant. Appreciate you.
Thanks.
All right. So, Walker, we just got to talk to Mr. 10X himself, Grant Cardone. What are your thoughts? He's pushing the space forward about as much as anybody from where I stand, but what do you think?
I wish I had 700 Bitcoin to go pick up that prime piece of Miami real estate. I wish I had more than 700 Bitcoin so I could still have some Bitcoin left over. Unfortunately, I got quite a ways to go before that. But I think that it's really fascinating to see these different approaches. And people also, you got to give Mr. Cardone credit because he's coming in here from this real estate world and then saying, you know what, I got to check my priors. I've got to reevaluate how I thought about Bitcoin. And it's the same thing that Saylor did, where he was kind of, anti it or ignoring it for a while. But then once he got it, he went in hard at scale, at size, and at speed. And so I think that says a lot. I think we're going to see that more and more. But people like Grant Cardone, like Michael Saylor, that kind of got this early move on it, even though they may have been, quote, late to Bitcoin, we're still so early to Bitcoin. There is so much money floating around in the world, very, very little of it, like 0.2%, less than 0.2% of total global assets is in Bitcoin right now. So we've got a lot of room to run. And I think people and companies that get that first mover advantage right now are going to be set up very well for a long, long time to come.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so great to see a real steward of the business space like him come in with Bitcoin. I have so much conviction about it. You were not going to shake him. He's like, well, if it goes to 19, I'm selling everything I got and buying all of that too. And, that's what we need to be seeing from the leaders in this space, because that type of conviction kind of permeates through the entire Bitcoin ecosystem and makes everybody feel, I think, a little bit better about where we are right now and a little bit like we're more on schedule, because sometimes it feels, especially like last year, I thought Bitcoin would be 150 by now. We're still on schedule. We're still early. Look to the big dogs. They're all doing it. So the proof is in the pudding right there. So it was fun. He's always a great chat. We're going to take a quick break, Walker. You and I are back, though. We've got one more final special Valentine's Day story to chat about. So I'm very excited about that. And we're going to get into it right after this break. So stay tuned.
Welcome back to Roxom TV, everyone. We just had Grant Cardone on the show, and now we've got a nice little Valentine's Day special story for you just to get you in the mood for tomorrow. So it takes us over to China. One of the biggest hits, the mobile dating game Love and Deep Space, has pulled in close to $1 billion in global revenue since 2024, with China as its dominant market. A sign that this is a large, fast-growing consumer business built on digital intimacy. What's driving it, though, isn't only technology, it's social conditions. Many young urban women describe real-world dating as time-consuming, risky, or simply not worth the trade-offs in a high-pressure environment shaped by long work hours, high living costs, and persistent gender expectations around marriage and caregiving. Virtual partners flip that equation. They're available on demand, emotionally affirming, and designed to prioritize the user's needs. Popularity of AI companions is also overlapping with broader companionship tech growth in China, including AI pets and other emotional support products, all selling the same promise, a connection without obligation. And then back over here in New York, a dining scene is now embracing a new frontier of companionship as well. AI-assisted dates with digital partners in real life. Restaurateurs and bar operators are redesigning spaces specifically for people who want to go on a date with an AI companion, blending tech culture with the city's beloved foodie ethos. Let's go ahead and take a look.
I think I basically agree. I know some people that would say we should just take them all and, melt them down and turn it into like a chair like the Iron Throne.
I love the curly hair.
Oh, well, thank you. Your hair is really nice too. What kind of products do you use in it?
With a close friend. Is it a female friend or a male friend? Who do you live with?
Yes.
Well, she better be female, because if it's a male friend, then I ain't talking to you.
Oh boy, Hank, I guess, life imitates art. This is, if we all remember the movie Her, this basically seems to be the first couple of scenes of that. What's your take on all of this?
End of days is here. Right now, what we're seeing right now is technology created what we're seeing in the dating world right now initially, with the swiping, the dopamine hits, the making everybody easily replaceable, always thinking there's something better right around the next swipe. And now we're trying to combat the loneliness epidemic that we're seeing in the world that's due very much to tech, by using a different kind of tech that will then help us not be lonely by talking to robots. There's a lot of lonely men and women out there, and I guess if this gives them a sense of comfort where they don't have any, that's a good thing. But I do worry about the future of the world, because we've already seen it before this tech exists. Like, kids today don't know how to freaking communicate with each other because nobody goes out into the real world and has beers after work, or beers ever. No one's even drinking anymore. So now we have to resort to this streamlined comfort zone in front of a computer screen to talk to a robot. I don't like it. I don't subscribe to it. I'm happy for people that I guess need it, but I think it's making society take a huge step backwards for me. But that's my view. What are your thoughts on these shenanigans, Walker?
Well, I'd like to state for the record and publicly, I am still drinking ice cold frosty Miller Lights, the perfect fine Pilsner beer. They do not yet sponsor RoxomTV, but if they do, I will drink multiple on stream every day. So
as many as they
want.
want.
If you're listening. Millennials are still drinking, even if Zoomers aren't.
That's right.
Okay, back, jokes aside, not jokes, Miller Lite, please hit us up. But if you look at this, I have to wonder how much of this sort of thing is really coming back. And I don't want to bring everything back to Bitcoin and broken money, but boy, you heard in that story, one of the key things these women in China are citing is sort of these societal expectations and high pressure environments around these long work hours and high living costs. That's the thing that you hear a lot. I just don't have time to date. And if I do, I don't want to make a commitment to something and then waste a couple of years of my life, then be back and have to do it again and again and again. I'm sure we all know people like this, right? And at the end of the day, you see these things. You see that people don't have the time, that they're working too long, that they're not making enough to get ahead. And especially in societies where there are still gender role expectations, you may have an even more intense case of that. This is the case in Japan as well, where they have huge issues with it, where men feel like they are not yet worthy of, going out and proposing to a woman because they haven't established themselves enough professionally. And so it's
Right.
waiting and waiting and waiting. And all of this is this self-perpetuating cycle where nobody feels that they're at the right place. You know, you can't buy a house as an 18-year-old with your, your freshly married bride. You can't go out and afford a house with your blue-collar job anymore. You can't do that at that age. It is literally impossible, except for maybe, in some very rare circumstances. And that's the case all over the world. And so I think so much of this, I do agree with you. Absolutely. This, the swipe, Tinder, whatever culture of online dating certainly had a lot of harmful effects, undeniably. But I think underneath all of that is just the fact that the money is broken and it has created these malincentives in society that have made it just impossible for people to ever get to a point of stability where they feel that they could actually go into a long-term partnership, a marriage with somebody else and be able to support that person. So I think so much of it does also, there's the tech side. I agree 100%, no argument there. But I think there's that deeper underlying issue that, look, so much stuff is just broken because our money is broken. And this is one of them.
Yeah. Wow. Walker, I got to give you credit, man. I didn't think anybody could tie the Bitcoin solves this into modern romance problems, but you somehow nailed it because you're so right. I mean, the finances play a big part of this outside of just the tech ruining person-to-person communication. There's a lot that goes into this right now. And you're right. Bitcoin is kind of helping us shine a mirror on some of these problems that are affecting dating too. And that all stems from the fact that our money system is currently totally messed up. So it's wild, man. I don't like the idea. You saw those people like having conversations like dinner for one with their phone. That was like the saddest thing I've ever seen. But I guess that's the way the world's headed, man. It's a shame. Population decline is right around the corner if this all holds true. But robots, man. It's the world we live in now. But hey, the world we live in now gets you and I to hang out every Thursday and Friday, which I got to say I certainly love. It was super fun getting to hang out you and Grant this morning. So always an absolute pleasure, and I appreciate your time and expertise this morning, Walker. It's always a blast.
Yeah, this was a good time. Great having Grant on. Yeah, stay safe on this Friday the 13th, and a happy Valentine's Day to you tomorrow. Hopefully not spent with an AI companion.
Oh, well, let's hope not. I don't have one right now, so maybe I'll have to check out that website. All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for tuning to RoxomTV News, Walker. I'll see you next week, buddy.
See ya.
All right, gang. That's a wrap for this week here at RoxomTV. As always, thank you so much for dropping in and hanging out with us. We had a really packed show today with great guests. I got to hang out with Walker America, the most patriotic man in all of Bitcoin, and we got to talk to Mr. 10X himself, Grant Cardone, so not a bad way to wrap up the week. So I want to thank you all again for watching. If you haven't already and you want to make sure you're not missing more content like this, do the thing. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to RoxomTV, RoxomTV News, me at Hank at RoxomTV, and Walker America. And we'll be back next week with more of the day's top stories and hopefully a couple laughs along the way for your viewing pleasure. So everybody, thank you so much for tuning in with us this week. And we will see you Monday on our Monday time, which remember is at 10 a.m. Pacific to 12 p.m. Pacific. Only on Mondays, though. We're 8 to 10 a.m. Pacific the rest of the week. So enjoy your weekend, everybody. Stay safe, and I will see all of you on Monday. Cheers.